final module. Welcome to the fourth and final module of leading school councils. These modules are aimed at school council chairs and co-chairs or vice chairs, but members are welcome, parent caregivers in the school, teachers, principals, whoever. This session will be recorded, and you will be able to find all 4 sessions on the Parent and Community Engagement Office's YouTube page, and I'll give you the link at the end of the presentation this evening. My name is Nancy Angevine Sands. I'm a parent and caregiver engagement consultant and a vendor with the board. And joining me this evening and every evening is Margaret Horvath. Margaret, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
I'm Margaret Horvath. I work in the Parent, Caregiver, and Community Engagement Office, and one of our responsibilities is school councils. So all things school councils falls under our office. So if you have any questions that you want to ask after the presentation, you can send an email to pceo@tdsb.on, and I've put it into the chat again, along with the YouTube channel, and you can go from there.
Thank you. And I think you put my email address in there as well. Right? So let's, there was something I wanted to say and I don't remember, so let's just get started. I really appreciate all of you being here this evening, and I'm going to try my best to finish by 7:30 and leave times for questions and answers. If you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And if you can, hang around to the end, because we have a poll that we want to take, because we're asking what's the best time for you to watch these training workshops. As I said, my name is Nancy Angevine Sands. You can find me on Twitter, and my email address is withequalstep@gmail.com. We'll put that in the chat as well. And I have a podcast that you can find wherever you find your podcast, and it's about, guess what? Parent caregiver engagement. So we'll begin with the acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and the Inuit peoples. The agenda for this evening, we're going to briefly look at the mandate for school councils, then what is effective engagement and why, a little tiny review of relationships and communications, and then I'm going to get into some strategies for you about how you can lead effective engagement through your school council. We'll end with some do's and don'ts, and then finally the poll that I mentioned. So here we go. We'll end this evening with where we started. My guy, keeping his eye on the ball. And the ball is the mandate of school councils, as stated in the Education Act, Regulation 612. The purpose of school councils is, through the active participation of parents, to improve pupil achievement and enhance the accountability of the education system to parents. You are an advisory group that provides advice to the school principal and the board and the ministry, if you wish. And they are required to respond back to your advice, not just, yeah, got it. As I've said before, they have to say, yes, we're taking your advice. No, we're not taking your advice, and here's why it won't work at this time. And we really like what you said, but we'd like to do it this way. We think it would work best at this time. What do you think? So why do we do parent caregiver engagement? I want you to stop and think for a minute. The average child, from the time they start school in JK until they graduate in grade 12, how much of their life do you think is spent asleep? How much is spent in school? And how much is spent away from school with friends, with family, just doing anything they're doing other than being asleep or in school? So take a moment and think about that. How much, let's just stick with how much time do you think they spend in school? So just, you don't have to write anything down, just think about it for a second. All right. I ask this question in a lot of the workshops I do. A lot of people tell me they think that kids are in school for at least 30% of their life. You may be surprised with the answers. 32% of their life is spent asleep. And I'm going to warn you, I've just remembered what's coming up is a typo and I forgot to change it. 17%, not 1,700%. 17% of their life is spent at school, and 51% of their life is spent doing other things. 17% of their life is spent from kindergarten to grade 12 is spent in school. Just 17%. So if we aren't engaging our parents and caregivers in learning and how to support learning at home, then we are wasting a massive resource. And that's what I want to talk to you about this evening. So what's parent caregiver engagement? It's a collaboration between home, school, and the community. That's one reason we call it a school council. It's home, school, and community coming together to figure out how best to do engagement. It's continuous across a child's life. It reinforces learning in the multiple settings where children learn, not just at school. At school, they have schooling, but they learn everywhere. It affirms and strengthens the family's cultural, racial, and linguistic identities. And it enhances the ability for parents to effectively support their children's learning. Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot, she's an author and a teacher, a prophet at Harvard. She says that everyone has something to offer the teacher's student and the parent's child. And we have to remember that. And sometimes we have to remind our teachers that. And we have to remind ourselves. The person who's at school and the person who's in our house, they're the same person. And teachers can help them, and parents and caregivers can help them. Each person working for the student, taking advantage of parent caregiver knowledge and taking advantage of teacher knowledge. So what 5 roles can families play to accelerate student learning? The Flamboyant Foundation has done a lot of research into this, and they list 5 things that parents and caregivers can do. They can advocate for their child. They can guide their child's education. That doesn't mean they decide what their child's going to do as they get older, but they guide them. They help them along the way. They support learning at home by having a space and a time for doing homework, by ensuring that there's other types of learning, reading and questioning and baking and all sorts of things. They can monitor their child's performance. This is really important. A study just came out, and it's a repeat of a study that's done a number of years in the States. It says that 89% of parents think that their child is working at grade level. And a lot of them are wrong. So we have to teach our families so that they can monitor their child's performance, work with the school so they know what their child is doing, how they're doing, and what they can do to support it. And finally, to communicate high expectations so that the child can achieve to the best of their ability. Last night, I talked about relationships. I'm just going to talk about it for a second again for those of you who weren't here. Engagement begins and ends with relationships. If we don't have good relationships with our parent and caregivers, with our teachers, with our principal, with our community, with our other council members, we can't have engagement. It starts with building mutual trust and respect, feeling comfortable with the many ways of knowing and being within our communities and around our council tables, sharing our ideas and our thoughts, and being authentic in the work that we do. And I saw this recently, and I wanted to add it because I really liked it. Sometimes when you're invited, you're still not welcomed. Know the difference. This is really important for you as a leader in your school, as a leader of your school council. We can open the invitation for parents and caregivers to come to our council meetings, to sit and participate. But if they don't feel welcomed, if we haven't worked to build a relationship with them, then it's not a relationship. You need to know the difference between inviting and being welcomed. So, communication. If we can't have engagement without relationships, we can't have relationships without communication. So I'd ask you to take a piece of paper and a pen or pencil right now, and I'm going to give you 4 instructions, and I would like you to follow those instructions. So I hope you're ready. The first thing I'd like you to do is draw a circle. Then I'd like you to draw a triangle. Then I'd like you to put a square in the corner. And finally, I'd ask you to write your name. All right, so I asked you to draw a circle. Then I asked you to draw a triangle. I asked you to put a square in the corner, and I asked you to write your name. And I'm wondering how many of you did something on your page that looks exactly like mine, or that looks pretty darn close to mine. And I'm going to assume, because I've done this exercise a number of times with school councils, with teachers, with principals, I'm going to assume that not a lot of you got it exactly right. And I'm wondering why. Because if you remember, last night, I said that communication should be clear and simple, not use fancy language or edubabble. And I think that my instructions were very clear. Draw a circle, draw a triangle, put a square in the corner, and write your name. So why doesn't yours look like mine? Well, because it was a monologue. That's one reason. Because you weren't allowed to ask me any questions. You weren't able to give me any input. You weren't able to work with a peer to see what they were doing. You had to make assumptions from what I said and do the best that you can do. We need to remember this as a school council and you as a leader. Often we are communicating, or we think we're communicating with our parents and caregivers, but what we send out isn't necessarily what they receive. I remember once my husband's cousin was talking to his wife, and they were disagreeing about, they just didn't agree with what the topic was. And he says, I'm sending on one frequency and you're receiving on another. I thought that was brilliant. I've used it many times. We do that as school councils and school council chairs. We send something out either to our parent caregivers, or when we're in a meeting with our principal, or when we ask our teachers something, we are sending things out on one frequency and they're receiving it on another. So we need to think about, how can we fix this? Well, we can ensure, as I've said, that your dialogue is 2 ways, that when you send things out, there's a way to hear back, that you are writing respectfully, that you're using simple language and clear language, and you're stating exact, so there can be there can be fewer misunderstandings of what's going on, that you're inviting participation, questions, ideas, suggestions, that the information you give out allows for people to give you information back, and that information influences the work that the council does going forward. And that you practice cross-cultural communication using translation and interpretation, listening, understanding the things that people know, the different ways of knowing and being within your community, and how people communicate and understand each other. For engagement to be effective, it has to be relational, it has to be linked to learning, and it has to build families' capabilities. All families have the capacity to support their children. All families have the capacity to support their children. They just may not have the capabilities. And your school council is there to provide them with the capabilities so that you can meet your mandate, to improve pupil achievement and make the system accountable. So what I want you to think about, and what we're going to look at this evening, is ways to build their capabilities, either through activities that are relational or that are linked to learning, or that are both. All three things happening at once. It's possible. But when you think of something to do as a council, when you are looking at an activity or an event to do, ask yourself, is it relational? Is it linked to learning? Or does it build family capabilities? So let's look at some strategies. First of all, and I've mentioned this in other workshops, survey your parents and caregivers for their needs. You can use Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, in person with hard copy, asking them questions and writing them down. Ask them what their capabilities are at tech, do they have Wi-Fi? Are they able to access different things? What materials do they need? What skills do they need to learn? When is the best time to do the teaching? And do they have concerns about well-being or academics or equity? And finally, what's their preferred method of communication? Do they want to see it on the school council, on the school's webpage? Do they get emails? If you sent information out through school messenger, would that work for them? What's the way? And then also gather and distribute up-to-date information that comes out either from the school or the board or the ministry or PIAC. PIAC sends out a lot of great stuff. They have a newsletter every week. They're on Twitter. Send that stuff out. Share that with your families and parents and caregivers. Building relationships. So simple things. This is linking all three. It's building relationships, it's building capabilities, and it's linked to learning. You could lead a family book club. You could do it in person or online or hybrid. I would suggest that you do it if you're in elementary school, that you maybe have a book club for primary, one for junior, one for intermediate. Middle school and high school, you could do it all together, where everybody reads a book and discusses it. You could do a chapter or two each week. Linking up with your teachers, if they want to participate in it, that'd be fabulous. But also asking them questions that would be good to ask, or points that you should bring up with them. When you're leading this book club and working with your teachers for it, what you're doing is you're teaching your parents and caregivers how to discuss books with their kids. You are building relationships, because if you all come together and you talk about one particular thing, you have one particular topic, that's really good. And you're building the capabilities and linking it to learning. Dr. Debbie Pusher is a professor at the University of Saskatchewan that works with parent-caregiver engagement. And she had what I thought was a unique, couple of unique things that she did with parents in a school. One of them was, if you're not from, and you would write a story, or the family would get together with their kids. Or if you're doing it just with the family, with the parent and caregivers, that's fine. Or you could do a parent caregiver and their kids there. If you're not from, and then you would tell something unique about your family. So my mother was from Denmark. And if I was writing something, I would say, if you're not from Denmark, you won't know what vanilla kranse is. And then I would explain what vanilla kranse is. By the way, it's a cookie, much like a shortbread. And I might describe how to make it and have a picture of it. And this is a great way for families to share information and stories about who they are, and for us all to learn about what the person next to us is. Margaret's family is from Scotland, and she might write something that says, if you're not from Scotland, you wouldn't know about, and then she would go on and write about that. Another idea that Dr. Pusher has is to have a family scrapbook night, where they come and they bring pictures or drawings, something about them. And you could spend some of your money to buy scrapbooks, or you could like make little scrapbooks, and they get together and they make a scrapbook about their family. They could draw pictures, they could tape anything, glue pictures that they brought from home, anything that they maps, whatever would tell a story about their family. And then, with the permission of the families, or the families doing it themselves, sharing that with their teachers, so that the teachers come to understand the families, come to understand their values, their culture, their practices. So these are all ways to build relationships and to link it to learning too, and a bit about family capabilities. Because, in writing this and creating this, families are also learning about how kids have to create and write in the classroom. Here's some strategies for building capabilities. Workshops that support learning, because that's what, as we saw, that's what engagement is for parents and caregivers, to support learning in the home. It'd be great if you had staff support on this, which I see a typo, which could either be staff at the school or staff at the board. You can always ask for, and through your principal, to have specialists come from the board to present a workshop to your parents and caregivers. It's free. These workshops should not be just somebody coming and talking at your parents. These are times to build capabilities, to teach things, to teach almost through learning, to teach simple things like rubrics. If your children, and I suspect all of you, they're being graded on a rubric, a 1, 2, 3, 4 rubric, a lot of our parents and caregivers, even though this has been happening for a long time, they don't understand what that means. They don't know what it means. What's a level 1 as compared to a level 4? And that's really important to know. Why? Because when their child brings an assignment home, they can now say, they don't have to work on the assignment, that's the child's job, but they can say, let me see the rubric for this, please. And then when the child has finished the work, they can say, and this is part of the supporting learning, what rubric, let's look at the rubric. What rubric do you think that you've met by doing this? And looking at it and say, well, I see a level 3 needs such and such. Have you done that? And then the child says yes, or they go back and they do a little bit better. In secondary school, teaching parents about My Blueprint. My Blueprint is the program that helps students to choose their options to guide their learning for post-secondary, whether it's trades or college or university. This is a great way for parents to learn how to, what I call planning backwards. This is what you want to do after secondary school. So what courses do you have to have in grade 12? And to have those grade 12 courses, what courses do you have to have in grade 11 and grade 10 and grade 9? So even when the child is in grade 7 and 8, for the parents to learn this so that they can help their child make the right decisions around options, and keeping their options open. Fabulous. You set it up in the library, put everybody in front of a computer, put on My Blueprint and teach them. Your guidance counselor, perhaps from the school, could lead that program, that workshop for you. Having workshops on social emotional support, so important now. We know from so many studies, People for Education just did one, that our kids, especially in high school, they need help with their social and emotional well-being. How can we as parents support them in doing that? Doing literacy and numeracy work, especially in elementary school. Each term, having, again, at the different levels, but having a teacher, begging a teacher to stay for school, after school, and teaching. This is what we're going to do in numeracy this month. We're working on geometry, and this is what it's looking like. And having the parents do the work and then going home with some tools. The teacher doesn't have to make the tools, but you working with the teacher could create some tools that they could go home with. And I also find that a lot of parents don't understand how their kids are assessed and evaluated. How did the teacher get to that grade that shows up on the report card? It goes back to what I said earlier about a lot of parents thinking their kids are working just great. They're right at grade level. Maybe they're not. So understanding that will help the parent to understand how they can help them and how they can interpret the report card and understand what's going on. Engagement consultant in Australia does a school tours, which I love. And you would arrange this with your staff. I will admit this is a little more difficult at secondary level. Kids don't really want their parents walking in the classroom while they're in it. So you would have, if you were doing it it's not that it can't happen, but if you were organizing it for secondary level, you would have to know, you take a little bit more work, what parents are coming and where are their kids. You get together, work it out with the teacher so the teachers know that you're coming in. You meet at the beginning and everybody should have a booklet. Either you tell them to bring it or you create something that they can write on. You ask them, what are you hoping to learn in this tour? What are you expecting to see? And then you go into a couple of different classrooms, just standing at the back very quietly and just observing, watching what's going on. What's the classroom like? What are the activities? What are the children doing? And then into another classroom. If you're in elementary or middle school, you would want to ensure that you're seeing different things. Maybe you would like to see a physical education class. Maybe you'd like to see a French class. Maybe you'd like to see a class when they're doing mathematics or when they're doing reading or social studies. Then you gather again in the staff room or in the auditorium, wherever, and you ask your parents and you sit down and you discuss, what did you learn? You knew what you wanted to learn, but did you learn that? And did you learn something else? And what surprised you in what you were learning? I love the school tour. It's a great way for parents to understand what their kid's day is like. Because chances are, if you're sitting around the dinner table and you say to your child, how was your day? It was fine. What did you do? Nothing. But if you go into the school, now, of course, this can only happen during the day. Although there are ways you could set it up in the evening with the help of your teachers, maybe even for parent-teacher night. But it's a great way for the parents to understand what their child's day looks like. At the high school level, I suggest doing something, and this you can do in the evening with the support of your teachers. Everyone who comes gets a timetable, and they have to look at the timetable, and they have a map of the school. And all right, you're going to math class, and so or you're going to English class, or you're going to phys ed, and everybody goes off to where their timetable tells them they have to go. There will be somebody there who's going to speak briefly about that subject matter or what the parents and caregivers should know about that subject matter. And then a buzzer comes on. Either you can ring the bell or you do a buzzer through the intercom, and everybody has to change classes. And they go to the next class on their schedule. And you do this 3 or 4 times. This is a great way for parents and caregivers to understand what their kids' day like is in high school, because English is on the 2nd floor at the west wing of the school, and phys ed is in the basement on the east wing, and they have to get there in less than 5 minutes, and they can't run. And you might have people standing in the hall, council members acting as teachers. No running in the halls. All right. Giving the parents an idea of what their kid's day is like. So now they know what to ask their kids. They know the expectations. Another way to build connections is community walks. This is an opportunity for the school's council, the staff, and the students to work together to plan a walk. It can often, in connection with your teachers, be linked to the curriculum. And it offers a chance to your staff to get to know their community. A lot of our staff, and it's not because they don't care, heavens no, it's not because they don't care, but they drive in the morning, they set up, they do their work, and at the end of the day, they're tired and they get home to their families. They don't often walk through the community or even drive through the community and know what it's like. I've done this with teachers and they're always amazed at what they find. I remember one school we did it at, and he said, "Oh, there's a basketball court just down the street from the school. I didn't know it was there. We could take the kids down there for basketball, for gym." And it's a great way to understand the school, to understand where your families are living and what they're doing. It could be led by the school council, or better yet, it could be led by your students. Where they're saying, this is my community. This is where we play. This is where we shop. This is where we worship. This is where we hang out. That's Mr. Brown. He's a little crazy and he does da-da-da. Or that's Mrs. Smith and she has a great garden and she always hands us out really great stuff at Halloween. It's an opportunity to build those connections between home and school and between each other. So last night I talked for quite a while about consultations. And so I mentioned listening sessions or conversation circles. And so I promised I would talk a bit about it this evening. Shane Saphir in her book says that we listen to ensure that the solutions we devise are shaped by voices at the margins, rather than our projection of what people need. And as I discussed last night, too often, those of us who sit around the council table, and look, I'm guilty, I did it myself, we decide what the need of the community is based on our needs. And what I need may not be what you need. It may not be what they need. And the people that we haven't heard from, the people at the margins, how do we know their needs if we haven't listened to them? Listening sessions, regularly scheduled opportunities to gather together and to just talk. The people who come in do the talking, you do the listening. It doesn't need to have the principal or a teacher there, but depending on the topic, you might want to have a principal or a teacher attend, again, to listen, to provide a little bit of information if a question comes up, but not to talk. So what does it look like? Well, each session should have a theme or a question. You begin with very clear guidelines, making sure they're culturally appropriate, that everything you're asking your parents to do, that everyone is feeling comfortable with that. You should always have a moderator who finds a place, who has their place is to find solutions, to have the participants find solutions rather than just come and complain. These aren't designed to be merely complaining. They might be based on complaints you've heard, but the aim is to find solutions, to find ideas, to find things that can go back to school council that they can provide advice to the school or the board on. You as the moderator and urging all of the other participants to have to be aware of your biases and be able to sit in discomfort with some of the things you're hearing. If you're hearing things like, you know, this made me feel unsafe, this made my child feel unsafe. To be open to new opinions and insights, and to watch for nonverbal cues, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So what are some sample questions that or topics you could do? Well, the first one, you could say, what's going well for your child and children right now? What's something you're proud of? Or what should we know about your beliefs or your values or your culture so that we can best support you? How could school council most effectively support our families? And if you're using the listening circle to gather data for the school improvement plan, you could say something like, when is your child's well-being been challenged. Now, if you've been with me in one of the other sessions, you will have heard me say that personal issues cannot come to the floor of the council. If a parent is concerned about a discipline thing that happened with their child, and they come to you about it, you cannot discuss the specific instance that happened, naming names, but you can discuss discipline in the school. You can discipline in the classrooms, what should be happened, what shouldn't be happened. You can address questions that parents have. At a listening circle or a conversation circle, it's a little bit looser. Remember, I said we don't want this to be just a complaining session. But if parents need to talk, remembering to respect their child's privacy as well, but if parents wish to talk about something that they're a little disturbed about or that they feel uneasy about, it's okay within boundaries that the moderator will watch for. The Brookings Institute in the United States has just done, they've done a huge survey of parents and teachers to get their feelings about education and see where a teacher's idea of education and a parent caregiver's idea of education, where they meet and where they're way off. And some of the questions that they asked, I thought would be really good for listening circles. Their goal was to get a detailed picture of family and teacher mindsets. These insights, they said, were important if the families and schools have to work together for a shared vision. And that's what you want to create as the leader of your council. You want to create a shared vision, not just within council, but within the school, within the classroom, a shared vision of what engagement would look like. So that from the front door to the classrooms, to the library, everywhere, that there's a shared vision or a shared ethos for what parent caregiver engagement would look like. So what were some of the questions they asked? They said, what are your beliefs about the most important purpose at school? A large portion of parents in this study said well-being. That was the most important purpose of school for them. Teachers, not so much. They were leaned a little bit more to the academics, but not as much as you might think. They asked, what's a quality education look like? And these questions, I think, are really important and valuable to know whether you are leading a council in an elementary school, a middle school, or a secondary school. What types of teaching and learning experiences do they think were most important for their children and students? What type of learning did their kids really get excited about? Right? That's a good question for parents for you to know from the parents and then pass on to the teachers. And then how were their educational beliefs formed? Probably through the education they received. If you remember last night, I spoke about the study that Dr. Anthony Newman did with parents from Eastern Europe, where they didn't understand our system because it was so totally different from the one they've been raised in. That's really important to know. It's really important for teachers to know, but it's really important for you to know as a council. So then you know, where do you have to build your family, parents and caregivers' capabilities about learning in Ontario? And this is I said earlier that there was to be aware of cues, and I saw this, I really liked it. 7% of what a speaker says, of what they are feeling, what they are truly feeling and what they mean, 7% is through the words they use. 50% is through the feelings and the intuition and the way they say what they're saying. And 43% is nonverbal. It's the way they sit. It's what they do. So when you're leading a listening circle, or even in school council, when you're having a discussion, this is a helpful thing to remember. They may be saying one thing with their words, but it's the way they're saying it and their physical being as they say it? Is it saying something else? Finally, an important strategy in deciding what you can do as a council is to value parent caregiver knowledge, to celebrate the diversity of your community by offering sessions by your families on any number of things. Our families are so rich with knowledge and skill sets. What they're doing right now in their life may not be a reflection of all of their skills and knowledge. I remember doing a workshop for newcomers a number of years ago, and there was a father there, and he was working in a distribution center. At home, he was a professor of mathematics. What could he do for a session around math? I suspect he would bring a different way of learning math or knowing math, and that's always helpful. There was another father there who was a reporter in Afghanistan, and what he could teach about any number of subjects would be fascinating. And you should encourage and assist your teachers in welcoming the parent caregiver knowledge that you become aware of and how they could make use of it in the classroom. Remember last night, I think it was last night, I was talking about volunteers and making a list of volunteers and their skill sets. Well, this is one use you would do for it. What are your skill sets? What are you good at? Not just here, but what do you know? What do you know that you could share with us? And keeping a list of that, using it for your workshops, but sharing it with teachers. So I've got just a few do's and don'ts for you to remember as a leader in your school and as a leader of your council. Couple do's, couple don'ts. Do build relations with your community and your staff. Clarify your role in the school council's approach to engagement. Don't be aloof or dismissive. Don't ignore parents and caregivers that you don't see a lot. Do share practices of the school, acknowledge whiteness and white privilege and power, and explicitly address race and racism practices. And connect with your principal and the board in how to do this. Don't engage in color blindness. Don't pretend that inequities are not happening. Avoid a lack of representation in your school council. When you're out there, someone was asking me last night, how do you engage people to become part of council in the year, in next year? Make sure that the diversity of your neighborhood is represented at your school council table. And sometimes often that's a personal invitation. Do work effectively with your principal, building collaboration. And don't dominate or lead meetings or decision-making. Ensure that everyone wants to speak, gets a chance to speak. Do build the capacity of your school council members around anti-oppressive practice and engagement training and resources. And don't ignore the consultation role that is so important for school councils and the SIP and other school committees and decisions. Do help school council respond to needs and wants of the whole school community. Don't just tweak around the edges, ignoring the margins. Sometimes when we want to change things, I just do a little of this and a little of that, and that's fine. No, that's tweaking around the edges. Go to the margins, bring people in. Some of you may have to work towards a wholesale change in the way your council is working. And some of you just have to refine what you're doing and to make it more effective and meaningful engagement. I was speaking or contact the school council chair that I've worked with a number of times over the last couple of years. And I asked her to reflect on what she thought was important for school councils and for school council leaders to know. She said a couple things that I thought were really important. I also hope that we created some trust between the school, its staff, and the community. that we are more than just a little school tucked away in the neighborhood. We care about our kids and their families at school and at home. You know, she said the trust between the administration and the school council is highly important. Active listening is huge for the community to feel properly engaged. Principals allowing school councils to think out of the box is so helpful, and supporting us while trying to navigate the restraints with the board is a must. It's a huge must. Us parents work for free for these schools. We put in a lot of mental, financial, and physical hours into the school. So I'm going to end this evening with my 5 hopes and dreams for you this year, for you as a leader and for you and your council. 1, I hope that you will go to the margins, that you will look who's sitting at your table and who you hear from, and you will try to figure out who and what informs your work. I dream that you will build collaborative relationships with your parents and caregivers, with the educators in your school, with your students, that you will trust them and they will trust you, and that you won't, after these workshops, that you won't return to your silos, each of you doing your own thing and having no connection. That you will understand that communication is key, and it's what works for families, and being flexible. I hope that you work for your families and not for the school. That fundraising is the how of how you do the work, not the why of why you exist. That you remember always that the mandate for school councils is pupil achievement and making the system accountable for parents and caregivers. I hope that you will evaluate and assess your work, that a good idea that doesn't work is still a good idea. You need to ask yourself, who did we reach and who didn't we reach, and why not? Whose needs did we try to answer, and did we answer those needs? And what can we do better next time? And finally, I hope that you see yourselves now as collaborative leaders in your school, that as the chair, you feel more empowered to lead your council, to explain to them their roles and their responsibilities and to help them to meet those things. That you feel empowered to lead in your community, building relationships and communication skills, that you and your council see yourselves as the eyes and the ears of your community, and that you lead in the school by making meaningful contributions to the SIP, the SSON, and the school committees. I want you to remember this as well in all things that you do. You can build partnerships by being transparent, inclusive, and accountable. With every decision that you make at council, ask your council, are we being transparent in this decision-making? Have we been inclusive? And are we being accountable to our parents and caregivers, to our staff, and to our community? And remember, the change moves at the speed of trust. First, you have to build those relationships and that trust, and then you can implement change. But don't try to do it all at once. Be easy on yourself. Where is your school council now? Where would you like it to be in March? And what do you have to do to get there? And where would you like it to be in June? And how do you have to get there? Be kind to yourself as you try to implement any change. And every evening I've left you with a quote that means a lot to me. And I'll leave you with this one tonight. Parent involvement, as practiced in most schools and reflected in the research literature, avoids issues of power and assigns parents a passive role in the maintenance of school culture. Parent engagement designates parents as citizens in the fullest sense, change agents who can transform urban schools and neighborhoods. Now, we're going to do a poll, and then I'm going to answer your questions. And Margaret is going to lead you through the poll, but just so you can start thinking, for future workshops like this, Would you prefer a morning workshop, an afternoon workshop, or an evening workshop? And if it's an evening workshop, would you prefer it start somewhere between 6 and 7 or 7 and 8? So it's up now, and you can only pick one. So away you go. Did I just wreck something, Margaret?
No, you're good.
I'm trying to stop my...
The poll is still happening. So we have 13 people who have responded. We're waiting for 2 more people who haven't yet responded. And maybe they aren't in the room right now.
Okay.
So I'm going to end the poll because maybe they're not here. We can share the results. Can everybody see the results? So it looks like it's pretty split.
Yeah.
Only one person wanted the morning, 2 people wanted the afternoon, and 10 of the 13 wanted about the time that we do now.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. It's hard to know when to do these. I know that you come home, you've got to make dinner, you got to get the kids settled. So this is very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So let's go through the questions.
Can we get rid of, can I just get rid of the poll?
Oh, I already did on my end.
Oh, okay. Are we continuing the recording?
Yep.
Okay.
Once we have engaged families and identified needs and made recommendations, what mechanisms exist within TDSB to ensure that schools and the board are accountable to respond and to act? Council chairs and execs are burning out because the system offloads labor to us, but then doesn't respect the knowledge and the expertise that family have.
Great question. So the Education Act, Regulation 612, and sometimes you have to say, it's my understanding that the Education Act, Regulation 612 says that principals must respond to any advice given to them by the council. I believe that's also in Regulation 613, which governs the operations of schools. So they are required to respond, and responding not just in saying, yeah, thanks, but in saying, as I said before, yes, we like your idea and this is what we're going to do. We can't do it right now, and here's why. We'd like to do that, and we're thinking maybe this way would be a good way. And when you give advice, you as the chair would follow up with them, give them a couple of weeks, maybe when you meet again to get ready for the to help do the agenda for the next meeting. Say, so what's the status of the advice that we gave at the last meeting? And if he or she doesn't have it, say, well, when could we expect to get a response to the advice that we gave? And if you have to say, it's my understanding that that's a requirement. Again, it's about building those relationships and that trust, and a trust where you can speak honestly with each other, and that's what you're aiming for. I think I said one of the other nights too. It's about, sometimes it's about teaching. It's about teaching or showing through your actions what's in it for the school to collaborate with you. That if you collaborate with us, we're here to support you. We're here to support your teachers. And if we can do this, then it's going to be easier for the teachers, and the kids are going to get better, and things are going to work better. Everyone's going to be feeling more supported.
You have to get the buy-in.
Yep, you have to get the buy-in.
You have to show them what is going to benefit them. And a follow-up to that is, but what if they change the principal, which is what they did?
So you got a principal trained, and then a new one came in. So
yeah.
Then you got to start all over again, I'm afraid. One thing that you have to remember is, principals, just like us, right? if your child has a bad experience in one grade, you're with a teacher, you're going to be a little bit leery next year what that teacher's going to be like, and is that one going to be better? If you hear on the neighborhood grapevine that a particular teacher isn't that great, you're going to walk in assuming that your kid's going to have trouble, and they could have a great year. They could have a great year. The same is true of teachers, and the same is true of principals. We're all human. If a principal is coming from a school where either as a vice principal or teacher, they had a bad experience with a school council, then I'm afraid you've got a bigger hill to climb. And what you've got to show them is this is the school council here. Here we build collaboration, and here we work together. And here I want to share with you, and I hope you'll share with me. And how can we work together? And sometimes you have to be the teacher for that. And then the principal goes, and then you got to start all over again. But you're doing the next school council a big favor, because the next school they're going to have left with a really good experience of school council.
Can school council organize any event for parents only?
Yeah. 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 I mean, a lot of the events you're organizing should be for parents. If you're doing an event and you're bringing kids in, that's an extra. I mean, bringing kids in, say you're doing a thing where you're building capabilities around learning a particular subject matter. You might, especially in elementary, it wouldn't work in high school, but you might bring the kids in to do the work together. Like, show me how you did this math work, and we'll work on it together. But most of the initiatives you take should be around building your parents' capabilities.
Okay, the next two are from the same person.
Can I just add to that?
Here you can.
I'm sorry, but I honor and value any work that any of you do in your schools. But I see a lot of school councils will do things. A lot of their work is around getting something in for the kids. So let's get scientists in the school in for the kids. Let's get magicians in for the kids. Let's get an arts group in for the kids. That's great, but that's not really your mandate. Unless you can find some way that what those kids are learning there, you can then transfer to the parents, so the parents learn it somehow themselves. Sorry, Margaret.
No problem. Okay. The school principal has all the responsibility to set up, and our principal has not made it a priority. I think the setup needs to be more co-chair friendly with less barriers. Responsibility to set up.
I'm not quite sure what that means. The responsibility is set up. You mean do you mean, could you just add another thing in the Q&A? Do you mean like set up?
School messenger.
Oh.
Okay, the school principal has all the responsibilities to set up school messenger, and our principal has not made it a priority. I think the setup needs to be more co-chair friendly. Yes, I can speak to this.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the way that school chairs get access is by reaching out to the school office. The principal, vice principal, or OA can set it up for you because they are TDSB employees. And then once you have access, you can do your messages that way. I did put into the chat what I have been supplied by IT. So that information that I put in came directly from IT. So you can check it out there. You can also check out the school council support page, and I will put that into the chat, and there'll be information there as well. But you just keep talking, Nancy, because I have to look for it.
I would go to the principal and very respectfully and kindly say, when can I expect? I'm assuming you don't have your school council email address yet. So when can I expect to get my school council email set up? You are aware that you have to do it. Should I ask the OA to do it, or is it what's the time frame we're working in here? And if they say, oh, I don't know, I'm so busy, I just don't have time, say, oh, I understand that, you must be swamped. And I'm sorry to put something else on your plate, but I'm going to need that email. It's November 16th. Could I get it by the 30th of November? Would that be possible? And then on the 28th of November, you go into the office and you say, have you got the email ready? The Parent and Community Engagement Office wants each of you as chairs to see yourselves as leaders in the school. Respectful, understanding leaders, but leaders nonetheless who have the right to have reasonable expectations of the other leaders in the school. Next. Or do you want me to take the next one?
Sure.
Okay. I think you can. And getting buy-in on these issues is not easy. We are BIPOC parents and the system is not open to our feedback. Yes. I'm assuming the issues you're talking about are things about the operation of school council. Can I make that assumption? I think sometimes you just have to call it out. And do all the if you keep going and you keep trying and you're facing pushback, and you are facing pushback based on the fact that you're a BIPOC parent, then I would contact the Parent and Community Engagement Office.
Okay, so follow-up. I don't know who the follow-up's coming from. We hear that events have to be student-oriented, i.e. different Heritage Month celebration organized by school council.
Really? Who told you that? If it's a past practice of the council, then the council, this year's council, needs to decide if this is something, if they want this to be one of their priorities. If it's dictated by the school doesn't get to dictate what the school council does. I'm sorry. This opens the question of how do you collaborate between a council and the school if the school wants you to do something that the council doesn't. So it's not just a matter of saying, no, I don't want to do that. We're not doing that. It's about talking and saying, listen, I understand that in the past we've done this, but we as a council need to decide if we want this to continue to be one of our priorities, or if we want to move into more effective engagement and start building the capabilities of our parents. And then we have to decide, can we do both? Probably not. But what can we do? Where can we do something that's linked to the parents, but parents and students are doing it together? Could we have some sort of evening event where the parents and the kids are together? There's a relationship building. Somehow it's linked to learning, or it's building their capabilities. So that is a way you could bring the two together. So you're answering the school's need or the school's wish list, and you're answering what you as a council want to do. But first of all, as a council, you need to think about what your priorities should be. And part of that too is discussing with your broader community what they want you to be. Change moves at the speed of trust.
So the last two questions were just about school council email account, so I answered them.
Okay.
And that's it. There's no more questions.
If you have a question, this is your last chance.
Time's ticking.
Tick, 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 tick. While I'm waiting, I just want to thank you, as I do each night. I want to thank you so much for being here. I want to thank you. I see one's come in. I'll get to it in a second. I want to thank you, those of you who have come to more than one. A big thank you for giving up. It was really hard to have it 4 nights in a row. I'm sorry we had to do that because of the school calendar, the board calendar. I tried really hard not to do that, both for you and for me. But what dedication you showed by showing up for 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of the evenings. The work you do, as I've said, every night is immensely important. And sometimes I know you don't feel appreciated or respected, but know that you are. Sometimes people just don't know that they appreciate what you do. And I hope that you go away from this feeling more confident, more supported in your role as a leader within your school. If you have any questions afterwards, please feel free to write me. Margaret put my email in the chat. And thank you for being here. Now, the last 2 questions that came in. Oh,
Just thank yous.
well, gosh. All right, go ahead. I hope your kids are in bed or will be soon. And go have a relaxing evening. And thank you for joining Margaret and I.
And that's a wrap.